This is the problem with technology, right? It doesn't really know it. Okay? And that's something that needs to be addressed in the past. It will not necessarily work as you anticipate. Okay, so Charlie mentioned about standardised products, okay, and sizing, and NTM as well. Standardised products don't fit highly varied populations, alright? Some of what I end up having to spend my time doing is provide some mechanism by which I can explain that highly complex problem to the majority of us that have sold the idea that there's some proportionality, and people be like, oh, your foot's as long as your arm. Well, I mean, it is within a tongue, it's nonsense, right? Proportions have kind of ruined our ability to make stuff, and I'd happily go through what data means. In fact, I had a conversation with a PhD researcher the other day who said, the problem is the products I've got, they match really well to these dress forms, but we can't integrate with the population. That's the absolute reality of it. So on the left-hand side here is just a map that had to be manually done if anyone really wants to spend a bit of time understanding what they can do with the data. Automating me getting these visuals would be lovely, because I have to do that in Excel, screenshot it, twist it sideways, mirror it, and then I get something out which looks like a body to show you the bust, waist and hip. On the left, that is the UK high street retailers. Okay, I think that's their size 12 offerings for bust, waist and hip. That is the conformity around which they want you and anyone as a customer to be. You don't get to have anything other than that shape, because that's what they're all making to. Every single one of them, there's no deviation. This is a population of around about 50 or 60 women, okay, who share a bust measurement within that range of those retailers. Look at that variation. There is absolutely no way that that fits properly anything other than about 10% of that population. Every time we try and mesh size data with population data, it doesn't work. So if any of you are thinking the problem is, and this is a constant theme, we scan people quite a lot, they come through the body scan, they're like, oh, the problem is my arms are too long. They're like, no, the problem is the sleeves are too short. But what happens with all of this is everyone internalises those problems because they believe industry has the answers. It's rubbish. There's no science behind sizing, okay? But equally, there's no need to do it, really. We can get a better understanding of populations, and this is just something I went through the other day, trying to look at how we can understand bodies in a meaningful way. So at the bottom, you've got torso length and leg length ratios. So this is how long the torso is in comparison to the legs. And then this is just 3 people sat within that population looking at how their ratios differ. So you've got people with a long torso, people with a short torso, and people with an average torso. And it might not look like a big shift in those images, but it's quite considerable the different experience those people are going to have of garments. All right? And then if you think about it, generally garments are made to a standard length. If you think about, any of us that know our clothing purchasing history will have seen them stopping making garments of an unfixed length, you know? You don't get them taken up anymore, you get them fixed length of trousers, because if your waist is that big, your legs are that long. It's crazy, right? But it's about retailers controlling inventories. It's got nothing to do with people. But if we can find better ways of helping people understand, am I interested to some degree in helping retailers make a better size offering? Maybe I am, because they'd be more sustainable. But I'll be honest, if they cared, they'd invest. They don't care. So they haven't invested, and we're in a situation now where we're making thousands of garments that just have nowhere to go. And you guys are having to go and shop and buy garments that don't really fit. Okay? So, scanning is kind of interesting. Okay, I won't ask for volunteers. Who wants to be scanned here in public? Lovely. But you have to be scanned in your underwear. So no one's going to be on the front now being scanned in their underwear, right? So when people are, can you do a live demo of scanning? You're like, probably not on the terms that you guys want to have happen, right? So we could possibly get you like a fitted catsuit and we could scan you in that, right? But what about at home with your phone? And they sell that as a possibility. So, you know, I can scan people on this. It's a Pixel 3, it's a fairly old phone, but it'll scan fairly well. It'll get data through. I've scanned my cell phones. Okay, I'd rather scan people in the boot scanner because I get better data from it. But even the idea of getting people that want to be scanned, to get scanned and engage with this technology means getting through all sorts of other barriers around the fact that it's probably the first time you'll have seen your body, okay, electronically. And most people that start to see it, in fact, I've been around people that have been scanning for a long time, including me. If you're unfortunate enough to have scanned yourself 15 years ago, it's quite a disturbing experience to scan yourself again now. Okay, I can tell you from personal experience. But the thought of being scanned isn't necessarily the biggest barrier, okay? The data challenges, current consensus and the business model isn't prepared to change. Okay, when I have this conversation and people say to me, TK Maxx is a clear example of business success. It's probably the clearest example of failure because the industry is reselling garments that didn't sell in their primary point of sale. So that says the market's not working properly unless you happen to be a business person, in which case apparently it's working perfectly well. But if you're concerned about the planet and sustainability, it's pretty poor. Okay, so what does technology offer? Different, evolution, develop theories, apply and refine them. Limitations at the moment, the version control stuff, I kind of like the idea of that. Anyone that does with software is kind of happy because you realise that you don't get it right and you keep iterating and evolving as it goes. But we need a less linear, sequential and more reflective practice. At the moment, if you're involved in garment production, you start and you end. But at the end point, you can't go back. All right? And that's where tech comes in, providing that facility to be able to go back down the chain and think, I made this decision, was it the right decision, how do I change it and how do I modify it? And you can only do that using tech. All right? So I would happily have the conversation about why people want to continue to use manual measurement. I accept that they're going to do that in all sorts of ways. You are not going to evolve product development using manual measurement. It's just not possible. Okay, and the reason it's not possible is you cannot get the information using a tape measure or even the tools. If I brought in an anthropometer and various other measurement devices and tried to capture what I can capture in a 1 second scan from you, it'd take me 40 minutes, I'd have to draw all over you, I'd have to poke and prod you, you'd probably be less impressed. Okay, but a scanner can get data and it can change the way we start to drive products, okay? So we can start to embed people back in products in a more meaningful way. If you want to know where, a sort of example of why that's meaningful, every single method that exists without, actually it's a lie, every single method apart from mine that exists for creating a pair of trousers drives crotch extension, the depth of your body front to back and the curve through the body by hip circumference. It means you have a singular relationship, okay? Circumference A drives depth X. And it doesn't matter if people are wide and shallow or narrow and deep, you get the same crotch curve and the same depth. But if you use a scanner, I can peel out depth of the body at the seat from any number of scans and position that in pattern construction technologies and automate that. But if I wanted to take that manually from you, you either stand against the wall and I take a tape measure and a book and, or I get an anthropometer and calipers and I move them and you guys are like, I'm not sure I really want this, okay? I don't want to be stood in my underwear with you, following me around with these metal tools as you're taking measurements from me, okay? So scanning offers huge opportunities to change what we do, okay, and evolve what we do, but then it has to have a context to feed into. And the practice for making products is, I don't know, poor is the term, underdeveloped, maybe that's probably a better term for it. And part of that is because there's no science in it. It's not glossy, it's not fancy, people don't see the need to invest, it's polymers, chemistry and physics, but you can engineer products. And it is possible to start to do that, and then you can start to change the way we engage with it. But there must be some support for that, and there isn't. And part of that maybe is trying to provide some of the openings. I'm trying to remember that more slides here. What might digitalisation do? This is the last slide. I appreciate we're running a bit behind time. How much time do I have?
Another 5 minutes and then questions.
That's fine. Okay, I won't go for 5 minutes then, because I'll probably just go off on a tangent. I'll try and wrap up with some kind of indication, and maybe try and say something positive that you guys want to hear, rather than me going down the industry. All right. But what I would say is, when people talk about, and Charlie mentioned made to measure, personally, it's going nowhere made to measure, because made to measure is rooted in proportional similarity. Even if you think about even high-tech applications of it and making men's suits and things like that, it's still about millimetre change of XY increments, right? When you draft a pattern, you plot an outline as a shape, okay? That shape's driven by a body. If you make MTM it, if you proportionally make it bigger or smaller, you've locked in the proportions that drove it originally. So you don't need to do that anymore. You can use Lectra, you can use Gerber, I'm told, which are both pieces of software. You can even use CV2D, which is free open source software, and you can create patterns that depend upon direct body measurements. So you create what we would call a parametric, some people call smart, what I would call a responsive pattern. It means that you can take a pattern, and whatever input you get, you're going to get an output for that individual. Okay? And that's something at the end of the session we'll talk about. So usually what should happen is people should kind of test the things that they do. But this is the first time I've had a sweatshirt through that system. Most of my sweatshirts are made off a pattern that I have and I've had for 10 years, and I just use it. This is off us using MTM stuff. Well, MTM, that's the wrong word, bespoke. Sorry. So this is a bespoke pattern, okay, which means my measurements coming out of the scanner drive this sweatshirt directly, and then it has a direct fit relationship to me. But it means what I now know is I need more ease at the cuff, right? Okay, and it comes back to what digitalisation will do for clothing is start to indicate what we need to address in terms of knowledge, all right? And if you don't know, ease is the difference between the body and the garment. If you don't know that difference, you can't control it, and then you can't reform it later on. But when you move into a digital environment throughout the production process, you can start to capture that information. And I now know I need to go back there and say, the end of this cuff needs to be twice my waist. All right, and then you can start to build theory. The other thing we've been able to do with this, when I started these sweatshirts, and it's a project we do with the students, when I started the sweatshirts, ease was a fixed value, okay? And ease is the difference between body and garment. It's a fixed amount, which means it's scalable throughout the whole size range as the same amount. But when I went to make a sweatshirt for my 4-year-old son, he doesn't need 16 centimetres ease at the chest. So what I was able to do in that digital environment was modify the ease calculations so they were based as a ratio of the set measurement. So now this sweatshirt is proportional, which means it won't just fit an adult, it will scale throughout the whole size range. There are still more things to address. I'm an academic, right? I find problems, and then I find some solutions, but I find more problems, right? If I'm in industry, they take my solutions and apply them, but I am supposed to find more problems. But that then helps direct people's research endeavours, so we can start to address what needs to be known. And that's kind of part of where we are now with this. We're saying if we can test these theories and approaches, we can work out what knowledge needs to be in place so that we can make those evolutions happen. The amount of times colleagues and I have sat in rooms with people telling us what technology is going to do, okay? And then that to-do failing to materialise year on year is, I think, for a lot of people looking on, must be quite heartbreaking. But actually, if they look at it and think, well, what do we need to know to make it work? And if we can direct that effort, and that is part of what we're doing with this. We can use digitalisation to provide a framework for us to think about what knowledge do we need, how do we structure it, how do we collect it, who from, and then how do we apply it in any meaningful way. And we can talk about what tech does, but unless we can show what it does, then we really aren't going to get very far. And that's part of what we do here with this, and what I'll do with anyone that comes later on will see the 4 sweatshirts we've made for 4 of the students. They're prepared to be scanned. From that we can start to then say, this is what's possible, and this is how it works. These are limitations, but how it works is important. I'll stop there. Maybe that was 5 minutes. Anyway, so I think you guys get to ask me some questions when I sit down and relax.
Does anyone have any questions for Simeon?
Have you identified any product categories that the technology will in others?
need the technology more than others. I think all of the products need it. I think actually what's directing my choice, right, is I've made sweatshirts, so I have some experience of doing that a little bit more. They have more of a fit tolerance. What I don't want to do is pick a garment which needs to fit exactly before you've refined the techniques. So at the moment I can stick to something which gives a little more opportunity for error than getting things wrong. But I mean, actually, there are plenty of products that need that type of input, and I find it difficult that the industry doesn't engineer products. You know, you've sat in fit sessions, right? Horrendous. Right? There are clear criteria for fit. Ease, grain line, you know, ease, grain line set, ease and balance, right? And they were laid down. I mean, that's traditional fit. Those terms don't get used in a fit session, but that's all they're assessing. So, you know, immediately that ability to, so the whole industry could do with a little bit of science and engineering.
How do you get the Zozo?
Yeah, I've got a Zozo suit, but they went for a while. I captured myself in a Zozo suit before. It's fine. It's not so much it's failed, I just think it's unnecessary. So Zozo had, for everyone's benefit, Zozo was a suit you put on with calibration markers on it. And even with all these scanners, there's some kind of calibration. If you use a LiDAR scanner, it's going to be projecting our light onto the body and photographing that. So the Zozo gives potentially better, more robust data than a single scan taking silhouette images, but it doesn't have that, no one sees the benefit of it. So Zozo, I think, is just back in Japan now. So I'm glad I got a suit for like £4 to have the experience and understand it. The idea is home scanning, but you know, what you've got to think about is how come, if you guys want a home scan, there are so many apps out there for you to home scan it. It's unbelievable. Part of the difficulty is what you get from it. So I would always use the app that we have that goes with the scanner we have, because I can get the OBJ, which is the watertight avatar, right, for me to analyse. But I don't trust the data coming from the scanner. I want to be able to run it myself through my own stuff. So.
Have you seen any examples in current retail where using 3D tech fixing is used in a way that is more human? So that, for example, for love, grant, you get it in the work, but it's still not purely way.
No, not really, sorry. I will look that up, but I think there's a lot of potential for it. But, okay, so when we were doing the scanning, and this is about 10 years ago, we took the scanner and did some scanning for ASOS, and then colleagues continued that in the institution I was at then. What I discovered during that project is the marketing department had all of the money, and the tech department had none, right? And so the marketing department are like, oh, look what technology will do, and they run away with this. And I think, you know, if anything's been oversold, it's you know, the future of 3D, because there are so many other areas to address before we even there. And I don't think there's a suitable appreciation of what it takes to do 3D prototyping in an industry environment compared to what it takes to do 3D prototyping in a purely visualization sales-based environment. So there's some great work moving on in that area, but there needs to be more of a convergence, really, and I don't think there's enough of that.
Do you see any negative connotations for the reuse and second-hand markets of non-standard sizes?
How do you mean what? Garments?
Yeah, so if you've got garments that are made specifically for one person's body shape, that might be difficult to resell.
See, I find that a fascinating thing, and people have raised that, and actually my answer is this, right? You've been wearing other people's garments your whole life. Unless you've had a garment made for you, who was it made to fit? It's somebody else's garment. Every garment you've been into a retail environment and bought, unless you're the fit model, was made for somebody else. And all the students raised it, and I'm like, I'll make a custom sweatshirt, and they're like, oh, but if it just fits me, it'll fit nobody else. Well, this purple sweatshirt, I know it's too thin on the wrist for me. Right? My wife isn't the same size and shape as me, but she likes it, so she'll probably take it, and she's kind of got thinner wrist than me, so she's okay with it. But we wear other people's garments every day. So actually, what I'm more interested in, is even at the lowest application end, just knowing how a body-to-product relationship works means I'm much more likely to be able to match you to a product made for somebody else. And I think, there's a missed opportunity in the industry, an app called FitBay that ran for a little while, but the industry didn't want to invest. But FitBay was peer-to-peer sales stuff. It was like, you bought product X, this is your body size and shape if you registered with the app. Person X comes in and it says, you're very similar to this person, you'll probably like this garment because they have it and they like it. So that facility to map people to products is more important. I don't think that bespoke is going to narrow it down that much, because our experience of garments, they've all been made for somebody else. You're just lucky. If it happens to fit you, you're probably close to the fit line.
You mentioned 10 years ago you were using standard technology and ASOS. What do you think is the barrier for the industry adopting this in the whole and fixing this problem? Do they make too much money already to fix it, or?
The business model works perfectly well for them.
Yeah.
The money keeps rolling in. They're not interested in sustainability. But coupled with that, they don't know what to do with the data. So even earlier than that, when they did Size UK, and they parted with information from Size UK in 2001, 2002 to the industry. I know people that worked in the industry at the time, and they were like, she got people, I had a colleague, a sort of friend that worked in Monsoon, and Monsoon went from using 20 body measurements to control their whole sizing fleet, to suddenly start to go like, and here's 140 measurements, they were just like, what do we do with these? I mean, this is impossible, and that was it for them, and then it just falls by the wayside, we're back to the old practice. Well, we know this, we're comfortable with it. Sizing systems work the same, right? I'll just give you the last thing I'll probably say, because you want someone else to come in. If you're unfortunate enough to ever look into what happens when they generate sizing systems, the research behind it starts like this. We measured a massive population. Oh, we got lots of data, it's amazing, all these measurements. And we looked at them, 10% of this data were outliers. So we removed the outliers. You're like, no, you didn't. You just told people they weren't able to get garments. There are no outliers in population data. They're just people you don't want to serve. And then it's very difficult to model this data. So we asked the industry what they do now. We settled on these 10 measurements and here's a size chart. Oh, great. So you just cut out every single, you're just whittling down what you're prepared to serve. And it's difficult, I accept it's difficult, but it's not impossible. And actually with the tech and the tools available, it's much more possible. But where I would like to be is not offering solutions to industry. Because if they want to pay for solutions and they've got money, they can do it. But what I want is a home sewer to be able to get a pattern that fits them. Or for somebody that wants to make stuff to get something that fits them. Because that matters. Because then the pyramid's right. Lots of people with access to it, experts at the top. At the moment, it's very much like this. And there's only 10 people at the top. Okay, guys, you probably haven't listened to me, I'm sure. But I'm happy to take other questions afterwards. Thank you for listening. Make this